Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Our principal has joined. We just wait for the other speakers.
Shall we move on to the inaugural session?
Yes.
Okay.
Good morning, ma'am. Dr. Saira Rahman is here. Morning, ma'am. Okay, we'll start then.
Good morning, everybody. We're starting our inaugural session. Our principal and our beloved student has joined us. So I invite Mridul Timranal, coordinator, to deliver the welcome address. I request all other participants to please mute their mics.
A very good morning to everyone. With warm greetings, it gives me great pleasure to extend welcome on this two-day webinar on narratives of freedom struggle in associative literature, organized by the Department of English. The Honorable Principal of our college, Dr. C. Rajesh, who will be narrating this session. Then, I would like to welcome our beloved HOD and IQC coordinator, Dr. Angela T.Y. Dr. Zahira Rahman, renowned academic and poet, who will be delivering the first keynote address. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome you, ma'am. I extend a warm welcome to Professor Ramya, who has kindly agreed to chair the session. I would like to welcome Dr. P.M. Habibur Rahman, Coordinator, Self-Financing Courses, and Dr. Santosh Babu, Staff Secretary. Last not least, I extend warm welcome to Professor Harsha.
Going to be some kind of catastrophe here.
I also welcome my dear colleagues and participants to this program. Without further ado, I invite our Honorable HOD, Dr. Angela T.Y., to deliver the presidential address. Over to you, ma'am.
Dr. Angela, you are muted. You are muted.
Oh, I'm sorry. Dr. Zaira Rahman, ma'am, could you just mute your mic?
Okay, just a minute. See,
Okay.
they're going to cut my.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you. I think, when 2-3 speakers keep their mics on, it gets, all
Okay, just a minute.
the
No, just a minute, Najila. See, would you ask Basima to read my message on WhatsApp? See, there is going to be a big catastrophe now because they're going to cut the current, electricity now. They are working on the line. My God. I don't know what's going on.
Will you be able to do the lecture, ma'am? Will you have a connection otherwise?
I don't know. I'm trying to. I'll do whatever I can. Okay, fine.
Okay, ma'am. You could just mute your mic for the time being and we finish with the inaugural and we'll see what happens. Respected Principal, Dr. C. Rajesh, Coordinator of the Self-Financing Courses, Dr. P.M. Habib Rahman, Staff Secretary, Dr. Santosh Babu, most respected guest today, our main speaker today, Dr. Zaira Rahman, coordinators of this program, Basima, Mridul, and other members of the department, participants, faculty, and students from the Paramish, Minty colleges, and other institutions all over. Welcome to the two-day national webinar on narratives of freedom in South Asian literatures. The history of South Asia has undeniably been defined by the experience of European colonialism in the last few centuries. And it's surprising actually that the Oxford English Dictionary defines colonialism as a settlement in a new country. It speaks of a body of people who settle in a new locality, forming a community subject to or connected with their parent state. This is so remarkable that this definition by the Oxford English Dictionary does not talk at all about any other people who might have been there already. Just like think of the Indians who were already here before the British came here and settled. But they have this, amusing kind of definition where they say that, yes, they just come and settle in some place and they have this connection with their parent state. So what about the encounter between these peoples, the colonized and the colonizer? Colonialism is not so innocent, and it cannot be relegated to just another event in the past. Just like the world wars, it had far-reaching consequences and extensive ones at that too, on the populations involved, and it continues even today, though colonialism proper did end quite some time ago, in the beginning of the 20th century itself in most of these countries. By the 1930s, around 85% of the land area on the globe was under domination by the European states, by the European governments. And almost all of South Asia was under colonization. India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Sri Lanka. Nepal was not under formal colonization, but yes, their history is also inseparably entangled in colonialism. Post-colonial narratives, actually, these are literary responses to these kinds of encounters. There are clashes and these freedom struggles, and especially if you think about India and Pakistan, the partition and its aftermath are huge repercussions of colonialism. So post-colonial narratives actually discuss experiences like slavery, migration, suppression and oppression, and resistance, difference, race, gender, place. A lot of topics are discussed. And a lot of these investigations have unearthed complex after effects of empire that might not be actually visible on the surface. And today with our webinar, we hope to engage with some of these difficult questions. We have with us Dr. Zaira Rahman. She'll speak to us on the idea of the nation in this globalized era, even in this post-colonial context. And we think that it has been long since over. Dr. Merin Simiraj, in the second plenary session, will enlighten us on the aspects of how historiography or how history is told, how history is written, and combined with that, theories of memory, how memory is volatile and maybe even changing over time. So how that is so important in the discussion of post-colonial narratives, while Dr. Asha will engage us with social reform, women's education, and early Indian fiction in the third plenary session. We have some interesting papers from some other faculty and students too lined up. We are so happy to have you all here for this particular webinar. Thank you for joining us. I invite our principal, Dr. C. Rajesh, to inaugurate this two-day national webinar on narratives of freedom struggle in South Asian literatures. Over to you, sir.
Am I audible?
Yes, sir, you are.
Respected keynote speaker of the webinar, Professor Zaira Rahman, Head of the Department of English, Dr. Najila, and coordinators of the webinar, Mrudul and Basima, other faculty members of Department of English, and the participants from different colleges under the Paramarch scheme and from other colleges. Actually, I'm indeed happy to know that the Department of English is organizing a two-day national webinar on a very relevant topic. That is narratives of freedom struggle in South Asia. We know the ideology, thought and writings of great men of letters shaped the great freedom movement of many countries in South Asia. During the days of freedom struggle in India, several men of letters produced creative works which inspired nationalism and patriotism among people. The powerful patriotic spirit of Tagore's literary works brought him in the mainstream of the freedom struggle that we know. The novelists like Mulkraj Anand, Raja Rao, R.K. Narayan, K.S. Venkataramani portrayed Gandhi's ideals and influence of Gandhi on Indian villages and towns. It is interesting to mention that at the age of 16, K.S. Venkataramani gave an eloquent speech protesting the partition of Bengal, and the same was published in the magazine The Indian Patriot. In regional languages also, there were contributions from writers and poets to the independence movement. In Malayalam, it was Vallathol Narayana Menon, M.N. Satyarthi, and A.P. Udayabhanu, among others. In Tamil, it was Na Chidambar Subramaniam and C. Suchellappa. These can be cited as some examples. Contributions from men of letters happened in other countries of South Asia also. In Sri Lanka, the British period saw literary activities of Arumuga Navalar and Siddhi Lebbe. In Bangladesh, it was Anisuzzaman whose writings influenced the language movement of 1971. Actually, this webinar is being organized in such a period of post-colonialism, as Dr. Najila mentioned, where the freedom of expression, especially writers, is facing challenges in different parts of the world. So an understanding of the life and works of those writers who overcame the resistance from the colonialism is relevant now. So I congratulate the department for taking initiative to organize this kind of a webinar under the Paramarth scheme of UGC. And I wish all success for the program. With these few words, I inaugurate the program. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your kind words. I invite Dr. P.M. Habibur Rahman, coordinator of self-financing courses, to felicitate this program. Sir? Habib, sir?
This might be
Basima, I think he's having some network connection issues.
Okay. Do we have Dr. Santosh Babu here?
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you so much, sir. In which case, I invite Dr. P.C. Santosh Babu, who's HOD of the Department of Commerce, as well as our staff secretary, to kindly felicitate this program.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Respected dignitaries on and off the dais, the stakeholders from various institutions of the country, a very warm good morning to one and all. So it gives me an immense pleasure to be a part and parcel of this two-day national webinar organized by the PG Department of English in association with IQAC. So actually the topic here chosen is very interesting and very contemporary too. It's about the narratives of narratives of freedom struggle in South Asian literatures. The moment of freedom struggle. So the moment of freedom struggle against colonialism of India as well as various other countries, especially the South Asian countries, had portrayed in many ways like films, literatures, etc. So all these gives us a new glimpse on the, or it's about the pain, pressures, then the strikes, protest, or even the very strong desire towards the horizon of independence, I think so. So in that sense, I think this webinar would give us a new and historical ideology of the freedom movements of various South Asian countries, especially from the literature's perspective. So I would like to congratulate the whole team behind the curtain of this webinar for organizing such a wonderful and informative, or most relevant seminar. So on behalf of the all members of the staff of the college, I wish all the success to the 2 days national webinar organized by the PG Department of English. once again, I congratulate the whole team behind the curtain of this English department for hosting such a wonderful seminar. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for your kind words and your cooperation. I invite Professor Harsha K., Assistant Professor, Department of English, to deliver a quick vote of thanks.
A very good morning, all. I am here to express my sincere gratitude to Dr. Rajesh sir, our principal, for inaugurating the session and also as all her supports. And I am happy to extend my heartfelt gratitude to Habib Rahman sir and also to Sandoz sir for their esteemed presence here. And I am extremely happy to express my gratitude to Sahira Rahman, Dr. Sahira Rahman ma'am, for accepting our invitation, and also to Ramya ma'am for being with us. And I am really thankful for Dr. Najla ma'am, head of our department, also our mentor and our guide, for all her supports and guidance. I am also thanking the coordinators of the event, Basima and Mudul, for coordinating such a great event, and also and thanking all my colleagues and all the participants and all my dear students and who are here to make this event. And thanking you all and wishing you a very good day.
Thank you so much, Harsha ma'am. Now, without further ado, we shall be moving on to our plenary session. Our keynote speaker, Dr. Zahira Rahman, her esteemed presence we appreciate. I invite Dr. Reggie Ayer, Assistant Professor, Department of English, to welcome our chair and our speaker. Over to you, ma'am.
Good morning, all. Am I audible?
Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Okay. Respected Principal, Dr. C. Rajesh, beloved HOD of Department of English, Dr. Najla T.Y., Honorable Chief Guest, Dr. Zahira Rahman, and Chair of the first plenary session, Professor Ramya V., and the coordinators of this two-day national webinar, Mridulsi Mridal, Shahil, and Bazima, and all other executive members, research scholars all over India, and my dear colleagues and students. This is the first day of the two-day national webinar on narratives of freedom struggle in South Asian literature, conducted by Department of English, MES KVM College under Paramarsh scheme. And it's my pleasure to welcome all of you to this plenary session. And before no words are there to introduce ma'am, our chief guest, Zahira Rahman ma'am, because all of you know she is a well-renowned poet and academician, and she was the HOD of the Department of English, Sulla Muslim College, Aricot, and before moving to Kannur University, and where she is a visiting faculty now, and she co-authored Introducing Literature for undergraduate students of University of Calicut. And she is also an artist and has worked in theater studies. And her poems, I remember, Bedouins and In Memoriam, especially for the displaced people of the world, which gained wide popularity. And we are blessed really with ma'am, your presence. A warm and cordial welcome ma'am to you. You are in this webinar, ma'am. Zahira ma'am.
Ma'am, could you
Once
please...
again,
Okay, thank you, Reggie. Yeah, it is. I can hear you. I have muted my microphone. That is why. Okay, fine. Okay, thank you so much.
Next. Okay, ma'am. I also welcome the chair of the session, Professor Ramya, Assistant Professor, Arts and Science College, Waipin. And she is alumni of our college. And a warm welcome you, ma'am, Ramya ma'am, to your mother college. And
Thank you.
I also welcome all of you to this national webinar. Once again, a warm welcome to all of you. Thank you, ma'am. I actually hand over this plenary session to the chair of the session, Ramya ma'am. Ma'am, please.
Yes, hope I'm audible. Good morning, all.
Yes, yes.
Yes, okay. Good morning, all. Thank you for those kind words. And I'm really happy this morning as I feel I'm taken back to my institution where I spent my 5 valuable years. I'm really proud and honored to be part of this academic session. And I'm interested to introduce the topic titled Post-Colonial Nation in the Era of Globalization. Post-colonial narrative seek to understand, negotiate, and critique a specific historical event, that is the colonial rule, while looking forward to a more just, socially egalitarian world order. No doubt it is a literature of resistance, anger, protest, hope, appropriation, and negotiation. So the task of postcolonial narratives has been to unpack those literary figures, themes, and representations that have enforced imperialistic ideology, colonial dominance, and continuing hegemony. While colonialism was a frontal or more militant system of conquest, as Dr. Nejla remarked, colonialism is never innocent. So globalization has generated a new form of colonial domination, often termed neocolonialism. So it does not take the form of violent conquest, but is a more diffused, insidious, and persistent form that makes a much use of culture as it does of political strategies. So, as part of this globalization, we have a global consumer culture with the proliferation of European branded goods that act as agents of neocolonialism when they enter and eventually take over the local markets. So, according to Michael Hart and Antonio Negri, they have called this new form of colonialism as empire. But the empire is decentered and deterritorialized, and at the same time incorporates nation with a complex nexus into a global realm. So there are no identifiable or recognizable structure of power here because financial, military, and political centers are multi-layered and diffused. So it is in this context of globalized cultural regimes, of new forms of domination and exploitation, of multiple displacements and cultural alignments, that new approaches to culture and cultural practices and academic discussion emerge. So I invite Dr. Sahira Rahman, retired Associate Professor, Department of English, Sulu Muslim College, to deliver her talk titled Post-Colonial Narrative in the Era of Globalization. Thank you, ma'am.
Good morning, Ramya, Reggie, Najila, Basima. Thank you so much for your words. I don't know where Reggie unearthed my poems from, but they were written long ago. Anyway, I'm so glad to be here. But I'm in a panic. I don't know, the electricity might go off any moment. So what I'll do here is read from a text. But there is an argument that I'm making, and this argument I would substantiate with the post-colonial scholars, the text from post-colonial scholars. So there will be a lot of quotes here in this text. But there is a central argument how the post-colonial discourses are informed by colonial narratives, and also how the post-colonial nation state, not just the nation, but the nation state figures in the globalized world. So that is the trajectory of my argument, and I'll read out. I'm really in a panic because I don't know when the electricity will go off. And so this is my text. As a subject of intellectual inquiry, post-colonial is a chaotic field with different perspectives. I heard too many here now, and also often obscure theoretical terms crisscrossing one another. So that we have always been hearing about the self and the other, the Orient, the binary, now hybridization, mimicry, all sorts of things from the post-colonial scholars. apart from the suffix question, which I will not touch upon here, is it post-colonial or is there a need for post and what is the meaning of post and all that? We are not doing that. There are Marxist readings of post-colonial and post-colonial feminism and other mixed fields which diversify, complicate, and also perhaps enrich the field. Now, this discipline of post-colonial studies that we have now in academics. Now, when we talk about post-colonial literature or narratives inside the academia, we might be referring to it as a record of the experience of colonialism of the 19th and 20th centuries across the world. These narratives are as diverse. This is what is very important. The narratives of the post-colonial are not homogeneous. They are so diverse and complex as any human experience. And more importantly, more often incomplete. There are narratives of the post-colonial experience that we haven't heard of. So the narratives which really record the significant truths of the colonial experience are not written or spoken of in academic spaces. I'm quoting Homi J. Bhabha, who is one of the trinity of the post-colonial scholars, the others being Spivak and Said. This is what everyone acknowledges anyway. So this is Homi Bhabha. Post-colonial, understood in the narrow disciplinary sense of some codified canonical knowledge, somehow restricts the exploration of its wider connotations. So what we learn in academics in post-colonial departments is really narrow. It is not complete. It's incomplete. The colonization of the East by the West was not uniform. Therefore, because it was not uniform, therefore the experience of violence, suffering, resistance were texts so disparate and complex that most were unwritten, and those that were written are often misread under the frameworks of academic disciplines. And then there is the paradox of the logic of colonization. See, the post-colonial narratives appeared after colonization or during colonization. That is another matter under discussion anyway. But this logic of colonization, it is really ironic. Homi Bhabha, in one of his interviews, says post-colonial studies is about the connections between things that we have not put together. And post-colonial studies is nothing but thinking about the Enlightenment. So the Enlightenment values were appropriated to perhaps justify the capital imperatives of colonialism. So actually one justified the other. When nation and civil society was being constructed in the West, paradoxically, the West was involved in creating colonies around the world. I'm on and off quoting Homi Bhabha, but I'm making my argument through them. The empire and imperialism, as we know, was a civilizing mission. The aim was to modernize and Christianize those nations or those people, not nations, but people ruled by Oriental despots. So that's another thing. So it was such a good thing that was happening. Bhabha, as I can say elsewhere, that post-colonialism is about the paradoxes of modernity and the contradictions of enlightenment. The construction of binaries to justify colonialism, the appropriation of enlightenment values of humanism, rationalism, all these people were rational. Those who colonized us were really rational, humane, civilized, cultured people who were just. So the enlightenment values of humanism, rationalism, civilization, culture, justice, and the construction of the concept of race all happened in the second phase of colonization. And these are pretty much the same justifications that brought into being the post-colonial nation state. And Spivak does say somewhere that colonization really began after the day after decolonization, the day after India gained independence. So Homi Bhabha, in his introduction to the book, Nation and Narration, quotes Anderson, Benedict Anderson. This is Anderson. What I'm proposing is that nationalism has to be understood by aligning it not with self-consciously held political ideologies, but with large cultural systems that preceded it, out of which, as well as against which it came into being. So when we talk about this cultural past, the field is so rife with tension. I'm again quoting Bhabha, the justifications of modernity, progress, homogeneity, cultural organicism, the deep nation, the long past, merely rationalize the authoritarian normalizing tendencies within cultures in the name of national interest or ethnic prerogative. That's what we see here now in the present, here. So it is, and I cannot even speak of it. So these concepts of homogeneity, Indianness, or whatever, the pure culture have to be subjected to critical scrutiny. We have to examine if the revolution that was brought about by the independence struggle was in fact a restoration of the colonial master's narrative. Anyway, moreover, the post-colonial obsession with the excesses of colonization seems to be out of place in the face of endemic problems of political, economic inequality in the post-colonial nation state. So the post-colonial nation state cannot be free of the accusations that it with which it targets the colonial empire. So the brutality of post-colonial realities within the nation also has to be addressed. We have to implicate the colonizer, yes, but no critique is possible without self-critique. In order to reimagine non-hierarchical futures, an undoing of the inequalities of European colonization would not be enough. The subaltern studies scholars have talked about how the independence struggle, the mass movement, was led by the middle class, and the rest of the workers at the ground level, the political workers at the ground level, though they were a part of the mass movement, records of their participation is not really given so much importance. So that's what the subaltern studies scholars have been unearthing. So nationalist thought informs post-colonial texts. The figure of a nation is ambivalent in the sense that it remains in the imagining of its people as a representation of social life and also as a discipline of social polity. So that is where this ambivalence comes from. Canonical thinking cannot reproduce what is really happening at the political level. Intellectual history or thinking does not validate political practice at the ground level. You have non-canonical literature. Non-canonical literature is actually effective in terms of political consequences of the social life of a nation. So one has to turn to non-canonical literature now, as we don't have too many, and most of them might be oral or unwritten, or it might be in posters or stickers or some kind of a text that is not canonical. So nationalist thought and the colonial world, there is this book called Nationalist Thought and the Colonial World, in which Partho Chatterjee, the subaltern studies scholar and academic, says the field study that he did for this book made it clear that political thinking and specific practices were at odds. So there was this thinking, intellectual activity, and there was political practices at the ground level, which were at odds. And the universal framework of canonical narratives and specific realities of the nation clash. And within the federal framework is a heterogeneity. So we are not confronting the heterogeneity of the nation state that we have now. So when nationalist ideology presented itself as seamless, the internal contradictions of the specific lives lived exposed the fissures and cracks. So when we examine the specific lives, we understand this nationalist ideology is not complete, or it lacks in meaning. So as Baba puts it, the language of those who write of it and the lives of those who live it. So there is a complete disjunct between these two. That is why we saw all these migrant workers moving, endlessly moving, feet cracked and bleeding. Now, Baba calls the nature of the nation states across the world now as tribal nationality. The phrase comes from Hannah Arendt's observation on the situation in 1930s when there was mass migration of peoples driven out by war and poverty. So a similar situation has arisen now with the post-colonial nation states preserving itself at the expense of those they deem to be threats to national security and national integrity. So now we have the post-colonial states, nation states. It's a kind of preservation. They talk about preservation. They are preserving themselves at the expense to national security and national integrity. This is a totally constructed narrative. And targeting people as outsiders is a part of the new tribal nationalist agenda to protect the majorities against the minorities. And this national myth is always presented as this xenophobic majority under threat by foreigners or minorities. And minorities are always seen as destroying the fabric of the nation. And this is more than discrimination of the other. So we talk about discrimination of the other in post-colonial studies, but this discourse is far more threatening and wild. Baba says of it as the new politics of dishonor and disintegration. They are targeted as outsiders and dishonored and denigrated. Mexicans are represented as rapists, and in Turkey there are the Armenians and the Kurds, and in India, who are targeted. Now, so this leads to the nation being turned into a tribal nation. So though these people have legal rights and citizenship, I'm a citizen of India, they are not fit to be a part of a civil society. It is a culture of exclusion. So that is how the post-colonial nation state works now. It is the irony of it all is that the political power of the nation state is rendered irrelevant in this globalized world. In the 21st century, global space, in this global space, the national borders are permeable. The global finance controls globally, irrespective of the political power of each nation state. Now, we have this liberalized economy. It erases borders, but we still talk about the nation, nationalism and anti-nationalism. Very ironic, very amusing to me, but not very amusing to people who live incarcerated. I mean, I am a privileged Muslim in India. I must quote Spivak here. The apparent contemporary success of capitalism, democracy, depends on a seemingly benevolent, identitarian ignoring of the shifting mechanics of value coding in the interest of the socially and nationally, she's put this in quotation, representative, socially and nationally representative concrete individual. So that is this socially and nationally representative individual. And there are others who are not that. And this value coding is done in the interest of these people. So she calls capitalism, in brackets, she has put democracy. So there is no difference between democracy and capitalism. As if now, political power, as I said, is now rendered irrelevant. Now political power, leaders with political power can start a war, kill their own people, render useless a whole community. But when it comes to constructing a democratic structure to empower people across the divide, I'm not talking about the socially, nationally representative concrete individual, but everyone, every citizen, the leaders are at the mercy of multinational corporations. So when it comes to empowering people, its citizens, the leaders are at the mercy of multinational corporations. Not perhaps they are aligned with, or they are together with the multinational corporations. And that is why we have all these farmers' protests. So what will happen is, just as Jameson said, we who are not in line with technology, who are not aligned to technology, will be left out. The algorithms of technology control the future. And this is what Harari also says. And I listened to Spivak yesterday. There was a talk, Angela Davis and Spivak talking very powerfully about the colonial, post-colonial nation state. And Spivak said, I mean, I don't want to end this on a negative note, so that is why I have taken Spivak in. So she says, there is a solution to this. Insert the subaltern into citizenship. The subalterns who are not trained in the habits of democracy. They are a part of this nation, but they are not actually metonymized into the democratic structure. They are not part, they are not inserted into citizenship. So one has to non-coercively try and rearrange the desires. See, now the need of the master is the desire of the subaltern. So it has to be rearranged. It's very interesting reading Spivak. And I'll end with a quote from Tagore, who was one of the avowed anti-nationalists. I put anti-nationalists in quotation because that is how we see the patriots now. So this is Tagore. A nation, in the sense of the political and economic union of people, is that aspect which a whole population assumes when organized for a mechanical purpose. So when the whole nation is organized in a certain mechanical fashion to produce capital, then it is not a good move. Nationalism has to be critiqued or looked at in a critical way. So this is my thesis. I think I have have not taken too much time, but the point is, I couldn't go further. I don't know when this electricity is going to go off. So please bear with me. Thank you.
Thank you, Sahira ma'am, for an insightful presentation and making us familiarized with the post-colonial paradigm shift and the power politics which repeats the idea of homogenization and hegemonization. I think it is very subtle. This new form of colonialism is very subtle and more nihilistic, which overthrow all peripheral culture in favor of a unipolar culture. So as now the platform is open for discussion, clarification and queries. Please come up with that.
I request the participants to please post your questions in the chat box. Ma'am, I believe they might still be thinking about what you have spoken. They were very relevant, and there were a couple of very interesting quotes that you mentioned. Something about there is no difference between capitalism and democracy is something that particularly struck me because we've been having discussions of similar sort among us colleagues. Would you kindly explicate a little bit on that? What do you think about it? About the quote specifically and what it would connote? Ma'am, I think your mic is on mute. Would you kindly unmute your mic?
Okay, actually, it is not a sentence. It is actually in brackets. It was a quotation from Gayatri's pivot. You know how hilarious she is sometimes. I mean, she has such a great, wonderful sense of humor that she pokes fun at, she targets people very subtly, and this humor is really pungent. She is talking about capitalism and the success of capitalism, and in brackets she has, instead of capitalism, she has in brackets written democracy or typed democracy. See, this no difference between capitalism and democracy. It is something very interesting. I mean, she is actually poking fun at the democratic structure, which is capitalist, which the imperative of which is capitalist. And even Tagore, years ago, long dead, he has talked about this capitalistic tendency of the nation. It is organized for a mechanical purpose of producing more wealth and more wealth. So this centering of the capital is very much evident in the nation state. Nation and nation state. Nation state is aligned to capitalism. It is capitalistic. So democracy or no democracy, it is capitalist. The abstract power of the capital is, it informs everything in a democracy today. Look at America, look at anywhere, any democratic country is somehow enslaved to capital.
True. You're absolutely right, ma'am. I think harbingers of democracy, or what they themselves call it, the US, they can, I think, never extricate themselves from the idea of capitalism. For them, pursuit of happiness, which is for them democratic and perhaps for the rest of the world very capitalistic, is something that they've written in their own constitution and keeps moving forward with it. Thank you so much.
And see, when Tagore talks about a nation, he always uses the word machine. I don't know why.
Tagore does have a more wider perspective of the world. He is more about universalism than
and internationalism. That is why he called his university Vishwa Bharati.
Yes, I think that's one of the most beautiful ideas that came out of the discourses of that time. Putting out universalism at a time when nation state and formation of a nation was in the centerfold is quite a brave thing to do. I mean, only somebody as visionary as Tagore would have done that.
This person called Gandhiji, he was a very strategic planner, and he knew that this concept of a nation is going to mobilize the mass, and that is how we could be independent. But then the problem with the independence struggle is it was a revolution, but it was, as I said, it was also a restoration.
True, in so many ways, yes. And nation state was as important. But I think Tagore's ideas should be, at this point, we should perhaps explore it in a more, considering explore it in a more comprehensive manner, maybe.
Yes, true. I have always been talking to students about this. That is, Tagore is a leader, a nationalist leader who, I mean, you can call him anti-nationalist now, but then he is the leader that we should pay more attention to these days. There was Partho Chatterjee talking about his field studies, and he talked to, in the 50s or 60s, I think, he talked to all these people in the villages, the peasants, and they were somehow disillusioned, disgruntled, because they said nothing has changed. We have the same police officers, we have the same tax collectors, and they behave in the same way of the colonial masters. So, I mean, nothing might not, because of the education system that was colonial. Totally colonial, and the babus, or the people trained in English education, according to Macaulay's Minutes, they were a different kind of people. They were in spirit like their colonial masters. So nothing much has changed. I mean, you can have a plethora of post-colonial literature, but there is this colonial hangover everywhere.
Because after around 80 years of independence, the colonial hangover is something that we have looming over our heads. In so many ways, I do not think that we can call ourselves an completely independent nation in that way when you look at something like neocolonialism and we are back to capitalism again.
Yeah, and we are colonized once again. We have this neo-colonization where we don't see the colonizer at all. And also, the point is, when we learn English, I think we have to have this perspective of English as a tool of the masters, which we can affirmatively sabotage. Use this tool to, in a different way. So, see, I am fascinated by Spivak's theories, so that is why she comes in. Affirmative sabotage is a wonderful, concept. I think we should look at English, the master's tool, in that manner. Not be subservient, not be, dependent on it, or not be enslaved to its superiority or whatever.
I think that is happening in English departments also now, and we are not actually privileging the literature from England or maybe the British literature. Of course, we can't actually make a shift quickly because of this importance of British literature all over India. Maybe you have all those constraints of a syllabus which actually holds us there, but there are so many studies which actually look at English as only a tool which is unifying us, like maybe translating into English and all the literature.
Najila, that is in a way true. I mean, it is not that we shouldn't study English or but then our perspectives of English or English literature should slightly change. There should be a kind of flexibility of imagination when we think of English. We should not think of English as something that has enslaved us forever. It is something that we can use, something that is useful and convenient. The language and also the literature, we can learn from it. And it is not as if we should completely disregard it and or not think of it, not think of translating works into English. It is useful to translate works into English. It is useful. Yeah, I mean, whatever the English people have done, this language is a world language.
Yes. And I was also amused actually by how you mentioned Spivak actually using capitalism and democracy interchangeably, and that is so. That's what the world is about today. Because colonialism is a thing of the past, but when you talk about neo-colonialism, we all know what is behind the facade of democracy. So it's actually plutocracy that's coming up, where the wealthy and all the people with power, they are the ones who decide. So earlier capitalism, colonialism was also a capitalist enterprise. If you think of it, like the East India Company coming and then overpowering everybody, the interests were actually capitalist. And so you see that when you cannot do that in a direct manner, so you've got this facade of the government that talks about you talked about the nation state and the nation, and you have this idea of nationalism and the nation state, nation, which is put in the front. And you have all this right-wing people coming up in all over the world, like maybe America or in India, wherever, you have the right-wing coming up, like trying to unify people on the facade of democracy, saying nation, we all belong to this particular nation. These, of course, it is a small group who decides what is what.
Yeah, it is a kind of politics of exclusion.
Yes.
Too many people are excluded to construct this nation.
You define a pure nation where few are excluded and few are included, and you have this sort
and also going back to the past, the narrative of the great past. Let's make America great again, and the Asha Bharata Samskaram and all those things. They are, perhaps it is true, but for grounding it and talking about it to construct this politics of exclusion, to construct this nation and then practice the politics of exclusion, I don't think it is doing us any good.
That is exactly it, where you go back to some, Asha Bharata Samskaram or this particular thing where you have one definition of culture or one definition of nature to which everybody must conform, and you have this others who are left out. And that is how political integration happens, and you have a lot of polarizations, and then when power comes up, it's ultimately capitalism that gains from it.
And also this thing, also about the post-colonial or the third world, all these terms that we so proudly talk about, or we accept, we acknowledge it as something grand and great. We are post-colonials, kind of some kind of a superior stance that we take when we talk about post-colonialism and we being post-colonials. I mean, that is also a reversal of strategies. Just as you talk about superior culture, the ethnic minority should not perhaps be projecting their minority status as something which is privileged. I remember Saniyam Kapikad talking about, I don't have anything against Brahmins, but what I resist is Brahminism. Even among the subalterns, not subalterns, I'm sorry, even among the Dalits, you have Brahminism. So that is the problem. When one talks about dominance and dominant cultures, we shouldn't be reversing the strategies and then trying to call ourselves dominant. I mean, with feminism or with whatever, I mean, we shouldn't fall into the same rut that we are criticizing. So self-criticism is very important.
True, ma'am. I think we have another question. We've had a couple of questions from our participants, but there's something else that one of the participants would like to ask. So Candace from Jessica Grad of Nirmala College has been asking, so Amitabh Ghosh stresses on the borderlessness of the world. Do you think it is a feasible idea?
I didn't get it.
So Candace, one of our participants, has a question. She'd like to ask, Amitabh Ghosh stresses on the idea of a borderless world. How feasible do you think it is?
My God, I haven't. I mean, this is something that everyone, all the post-colonial scholars and also various other people are talking about. Homi Bhabha talks about hybridization and borderlessness and all those things, but I don't know. I have no answer to this question. I've been racking my brain thinking about what would happen if there is no nation state. How would there be a community of people who care for each other and who identify with each other? I mean, nationalism is good in that sense. We are a community of people. We identify with each other. We feel for each other. That is good. But to have this homogeneous group of people who are driven by this greed for wealth, this machine, the whole machine of the nation, doing the single and going forward for a single purpose. I think I don't go by that. I would love to have small communities who, this is me, the very minor scholar talking about it, small communities, not a big nation, who can integrate and perhaps diversify and all those diverse cultures in small communities, who can talk to one another and do things for one another, which would be better than this great community of people who are capitalist.
Yeah. In so many ways, yes. I think, but if you look at borders,
I don't know if that can happen because it is a globalized world, and in a globalized world, it is technology connected by technology, and I don't think that is going to break up. There is this huge network of virtual reality which we cannot confront, and which is very, which is so pervasive. And technology is something that we cannot now deal with. The algorithms of technology decide everything, and it decides the future. So I'm really frightened. I mean, how can we distance ourselves? How can we detach ourselves from this huge virtual world and build small communities? I don't know. It seems utopia.
True. But in some ways, if you look at it, we can perhaps do away with the trauma that the borders create. So I once attended this event where Alan Seeley was speaking.
Yeah.
And when he was, it was his book launch on the book called The Alchemist, which is a novel written poetry format. Yes, yeah, it's a beautiful one. And he was talking about the book, and Akbar's ghost is traveling across Agra. And one of the participants asked him, "Sir, what do you think of the trauma that the border has caused?" So Akbar is mourning the border that comes between India and Pakistan. For him, it's all a united India, and now there's a border. Yeah, the question was posed to Seeley. How do you think, we can overcome the trauma that the partition at the border has caused? And Seeley said, you see, my answer would be just walk. You walk across the border, and people from both sides of the border walk, cross that border, and reach each other. There is forgiveness. There isn't so much trauma anymore. We can exist as communities, but at the same time, we can forgive each other. Perhaps the trauma that our generation past has caused. I think that
that would be, end in violent bloodshed, would it? In this present situation, I am not very sure what. I mean, that is another thing that everyday theory says. In order to confront the modern urban spaces, which are under surveillance, which are fenced, we have to walk. Walking is the best thing. So, but then I don't know. I don't know how that can be physically done. You could virtually walk, but not physically.
Yeah,
I think in this case, we should thank the virtual world for giving us an opportunity of that.
But then it is also dangerous. There is the other side to this, algorithm that we are not. I mean, if everyone were trained in this technology, then perhaps we would be able to control the algorithms. But now algorithms control us.
True.
And as with industrialization, during industrialization, a large number of the majority were, rendered poor and also disenfranchised, and they were dispossessed. But with the new technological revolution, the same thing might be going to happen. Only 1% is going to reap the benefits of technology, and the rest of us. Somebody talked about the weavers in Bangladesh who have no access to technology, who might starve to death. So this is also a truth. So we have to explore further, and it is left to the young people to do what they can.
Hopefully, ma'am. Mridul has a question.
Indeed, I think the same feeling we have when we read Amrita Pritam's An Ode to Varisha. Because she is calling upon what is the situation of Punjab, the bloodshed and everything. So during the inaugural session, I think our principal mentioned various narratives from the vernacular Indian languages. So I want to know, this is a pretty direct question. What is the role of the sub-nationalities in the post-colonial nation in the era of globalization, the sub-nationalities?
See, one thing is these sub-nationalities have not been incorporated into the space of the nation. They are still in the marginalized regions. So it depends on the organic intellectuals or good people to incorporate them, to insert them into citizenship, to help them avail the benefits of education or whatever the nation state is capable of giving them or is supposed to give them. So that has to be ensured. And their narratives have to be recorded, which is not the case now. I mean, they do not form a part of the canon. It is because they are subalterns. They are denied social mobility. And people like Gayatri Spivak is working with them. I mean, very few people are working with them. The NGOs or the international community, they might not be maybe they are, some of them are, practicing top-down philanthropy, which really does not help them. They have to be, see, the subjectification of these people are not happening. They have no agency. So what we have to do is give them agency. Learn to learn from below is another phrase that Gayatri Spivak uses. This top-down philanthropy will not help at all. So one has to, do this non-coercive rearrangement of desires for these people. Non-coercive rearrangement of desires of these people. I mean, what happens now is the desires are now aligned to the need of the masters. So that has to be somehow taken care of.
True, ma'am. I think we have one more question. Will you be able to take it?
Yeah, right. No, I'm glad that the electricity has not gone.
Thank you.
I was panicking. I was really in a panic.
So this question is from Ms. Abharami Ranjit. She says, she spoke about the colonial agenda of civilization and Christianization. She'd like to know, how far do you think the natives working for colonial administration endorsed this idea of reformation, staying within the already existing caste and gender positions of the nation? Would you like me to repeat it?
Yeah, difficult question. I am not into, I have not read too much on the history of national struggle, except for some books, Nehru, Gandhi, Tagore. So I am not very sure. You're talking about how the people, Indian babus, you're talking about Indian officers. Yes. How did they do what? How did they?
Do you think that they have endorsed this idea of reformation, staying within the already existing caste and gender positions?
Many of them did. Many of them were educated in English and English values and colonial values, the values of the Enlightenment, and it was good. I mean, humanism, rationalism, I mean, it seemed good. So they might have endorsed it. See, I grew up in a household where English was spoken. See, I'm a Muslim. I'm a Malayali Muslim. But my grandfather worked with the British. My grandfather was a British police officer. So, so we did endorse the British values. And I still think laying the table before breakfast is fine. Is there something wrong?
No, ma'am, we can hear you, ma'am.
Okay, something has gone off. Okay. Now, so this kind of an endorsing of the values of the colonizer did happen. There was this unquestioning, and especially the English babus. My uncle in the sense, my great uncle, my granduncle, he kept butlers. And there were forks and spoons on the table. And I find it strange now that I thought it was normal. And when I was a child, when I visited my grandmother's place, there was this huge British bungalow, and there was this table laid for breakfast. And for breakfast, you had this cups of tea, all this china and things like that. And my grandmother wore Indian clothes, the tatam and alikat and all that was there, but she spoke British English. And see, there is this contradiction. There were these group of people who were British in spirit and Indian in manners, or whatever, what Macaulay envisaged. That did come true for some time. That was there. And even now we do have people like that. many people like that who think the British should not have left us.
Yes, ma'am. True. That is one thing.
I think there is a notion among the Anglo-Indian community still that the British should not left us.
Yeah, right. And see, as I said, this field of post-colonialism is so complex and diverse that you cannot fix it anywhere. You cannot homogenize it. It has to be explored further and further. And you unearth various truths which might be unpalatable sometimes.
True, which is something that scares us into not unearthing. Unearthing is a difficult task. Exploring one's own history is a difficult task. We may not know what we may find.
Yeah, right. But the point here is the post-colonial nation state is the same as the colonial empire, or it replicates the colonial empire.
Ma'am, on that note, there is one little question. If you could give us some insight to the relevance of post-colonial thinking in a pandemic situation. Specific to the pandemic situation, how do you think we can think about post-colonialism?
How do I think? When there have been people talking about it, Harari has been very eloquent on this. See, the pandemic has really opened borders rather than closing it, according to me. We have become a community of global citizens helping one another. That is what I think the pandemic has done. We are more aware of the climate situation globally rather than nationally. We as people, I'm not talking about leaders, we as people, we are more open to views than we have been ever before.
Okay, that is a very interesting insight, I believe. I hope there aren't any more questions. We've gotten a bunch of questions from our YouTube live streaming. Thank you so much for the participants doing so. And ma'am, I think Professor Ramya is having some severe network issues. So
okay, fine. It's okay.
Right. So if the participants do not have any more questions, shall we move on to the vote of thanks delivery?
Yes, please do. Please.
All right. In which case, I invite Professor Sivya Vasudevan from the Department of English to deliver a vote of thanks. Sivya, ma'am?
Yes.
Thank you. Over to you, ma'am.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. I can switch off my mic now.
So, ma'am, so full. I don't mean you were here together. And invitation and coming over. Okay. Then our Dr. Najla. It was so excellent.
I think some network issues.
I can't hear her. It's okay. Maybe she has some network issues.
Which kind of delivers everything somewhat late. One of the many issues with technology that we face now. There seems to be some network issue that she's able to join, but she's unable to deliver it. In which case, on behalf of the Department of English, may I move on to the delivery of vote of thanks, if you do not mind. First of all, I'd like to extend a great, huge thank you to Dr. Zahida Rahman, who's very kind to join us and give us so many insights. I think affirmative sabotage is my new favorite phrase. Thank you so much, ma'am. We hope to host you more times here. We'd love to hear you. And thank you so much to our HOD, Dr. Najla T.Y. She's been our strength throughout this process of organizing a national webinar. And I also extend my gratitude to Professor Ramya, who may not be in this chat. Nevertheless, She has very kindly agreed to chair us and has been doing moderation for some time, moderating the discussion for some time before she had the network issues. I also thank all the participants from all over the country, especially the Menti colleges, for being here, for attending this session, for giving us very good questions to lead the discussion with. I thank the supporting staff as well as my colleagues for being here with us and giving us great support that we needed. Ma'am, Dr. Najla, would you like to add something, ma'am, before we end the session?
Thank you, Subhasima. Thank you, everyone. I would just like to conclude by extending our heartfelt gratitude to Dr. Zaira Rahman. Thank you, ma'am, for doing this session, which you connected with the contemporary world and how colonialism still casts its shadow over all of us and all over the world, of course, how it goes. Thank you so much for being here. And on that note, I would also like to say, add to what Basima said, that we would like to have you over again, ma'am. Your poetry side is something we did not get to explore in this particular session here. So we look forward to having a poetry workshop with our students and with us here, ma'am. So hope to see you soon. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'm leaving, but then I would like to thank you too. It's the first time I'm meeting every one of you. I know none of you, but it seems as if we are not strangers at all. I know Basima through Nasir, my classmate, but the rest of you, I haven't met her ever, but then still, it seems as if we know each other. We have known each other for a long time. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Thank you, ma'am. Before we leave, we have our first set of panel presentations at 12 p.m. sharp. I request all of you who've been attending this meeting to join the same link. We shall have 6 presentations from very good presenters from all over the country. We shall also be sending the feedback link in both YouTube and this Google Meet chat box. Thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.